initially, when I first got started in book publishing over a decade ago, I've had great success self-publishing my book because the royalties from that book were higher than my salary in my corporate job at the time.
Leaders Press is a USA Today and Wall Street Journal best-selling press with traditional distribution via Simon & Schuster. Thanks to their work, more than 500 entrepreneurs have been able to share their stories with the world, and 133 of their authors have become USA Today and Wall Street Journal best-selling authors in their own right. If you'd like to discover which type of book would best suit you, go to leaderspress.com/reveal. In this episode of the Leaders Get Published podcast, the Leaders Press team will discuss the pros and cons of self-publishing on Amazon.
I'm Alinka Rudkowska, the founder of Leaders Press. With me are my CEOs, Grace O'Donnell and Deborah Brannon, and this is the Leaders Get Published podcast. In this episode, we talk about the pros and cons of self-publishing. Deborah, you have played a very important role in Leaders Press since the beginning. And before we started distributing through Simon & Schuster, we did publish books directly through KDP. And occasionally, for some of our projects, we still do. So that is quite different, using that in the print-on-demand system. That's quite different from going through a traditional distribution channel like we do now for our main projects. Can you speak to the main pros and cons of going through the self-publishing channel?
Well, speaking specifically to the pros and cons of publishing to KDP, it's a time flexibility thing. Especially when you're comparing that to going through traditional distribution channels. But we can put that in the back seat and come back to it a little later when we talk specifically about Amazon and posting, I'm sorry, not posting, but publishing your ebook or your paperback through KDP. But first off, I think that the main advantages of publishing, of self-publishing, right, is the degree of creative control that you can exert over your project. The fact that you can command higher royalty rates, less waiting, like you don't have to wait as long to publish if you're in charge of everything yourself, as long as you can manage your timeline and keep to your own self-imposed deadlines. And then, of course, you're in charge of your own name, your own brand, and you can go out there and build it for yourself. No waiting, no muss, no fuss by publishing on KDP or Barnes & Noble or the other self-publishing venues you have available to you. So the first pro is the creative control and just being able to fully master every part of this process. So you make the final decisions on the cover, you make the final decisions on your layout, you make the final decisions on your publication date. That's all on you. And I know that we've spoken in the past about how that differs from traditional publishing, but I'll let Alinka chime in with a little tiny summary about how that's different from other routes of publishing.
Well, the print-on-demand system is magic to me. The fact that you don't need to go through a gatekeeper, because we spoke about what it takes to actually get your manuscript into a traditional publishing house. There are gatekeepers, and you have to be prepared to be very persistent to pitch hundreds of agents who then maybe, if you're good enough, will then take care of your manuscript and pitch it to publishers. And then if they decide to take it on, then you're in for a 2-year wait or so. And then your book will get on the bookshelf, and you probably will not be very much in control of the cover or, maybe even the content of your book. And with self-publishing, can you imagine? You can just go to kdp.com, sign in with your Amazon account, and publish anything you want. that will be attached to your name. So when anybody searches for you online and they see what you actually published, this will be a representation of you. So if you didn't really pay attention on, how to do this right, if you didn't go to, the book publishing class back at school, there probably weren't any. So you probably haven't taken a course, but so there's a lot to learn to do this right, but the freedom, and the opportunity for everybody to have a voice in the printing world this way, I think is phenomenal. And, this is really now that this is happening on such a wide scale. So, with great power, that is great power, comes great responsibility, because you are the owner of everything associated with this book. So whether you do it wrong or whether you do it right, as Deborah said, it's on you. So, you better do it right. But you can do it, which is a great thing. And I have had, initially when I first got started in book publishing over a decade ago, I've had great success self-publishing my book, because the royalties from that book were higher than my salary in my corporate job at the time. And it will be pretty naive to think that you can, keep on living for a very long time off of the royalties of your book. I think I had beginner's luck and got so excited about the whole publishing industry because of that, because I saw I could live off of that. That I just wanted to do more and more and get better and better, dig deeper. And authors started reaching out to me asking, hey, can you do for me what you're doing for yourself? So that's how I got started, and then that's how Leaders Press started. But I think it's phenomenal that you can do it. That's the number one thing. It gives you a really easy way to have a voice. So that would be the first and foremost pro of self-publishing.
You also have greater agility when you have all the creative control, because if something's not working or if you need to make a change, you can do that immediately yourself. You don't have to wait on another party to do it for you.
I think it's interesting that we keep calling it self-publishing, though, because even though you are self-publishing, you probably will need kind of a team of professionals. You'll still need to hire a professional cover designer, a professional editor. So you have to be prepared to project manage that too. And you are, again, responsible for all of that.
I completely agree. Like trying to edit your own book or trying to develop your own cover, if you don't have those specific skill sets, is a terrible challenge. And you might be up for the challenge, and that's awesome. But I find that most people benefit from at least an outside eye who can guide their choices and give them feedback on whether they've done a good job or not.
Well, I think I could take on the challenge to create and publish a book in 5 minutes. On KDP. That would be basically, a picture of what I'm looking at right now of you, the two of you. That could be the cover, and inside I could say Team Awesome. So that could be the book. So I already have the title, Team Awesome, and I would be the author, and I would be the publisher, and I will have Amazon assign the ISBN. When they ask me about the description, I'm not going to write anything. When they ask me about the keywords, I'm not going to write anything. When they ask me about the categories, I'm not going to assign any. The cover, I'm just going to pick any template generic that they have there, and then go, okay. Price point, how about $9.99 for my wonderful book? And we're done. I'm pretty sure I can accomplish this in 5 minutes. I'm not sure how many sales I'm going to get, but people have done this before. So, the power is there. The power is really in the readers, because it's the reader who decides whether you will be whether you will be listened or whether you will have a voice or not. So there's so much that goes into it. I just read I'm reading a great book by Dan Sullivan and Benjamin Hardy, The Gap and the Gain. And one of the concepts they're talking about is when you're in the gap, it means that you're looking for outside approval for you to feel better. So pitching your book to agents and looking for their approval is basically being in the gap. Whereas being in the gain means that you are self-determined and self, I guess you can say, loving, like confident. You don't need anybody else's approval to decide how worthy you are. So if you're gonna, go through the self-publishing, or Grace would call it team publishing channel, then you need it comes with a certain self-confidence to do that. So I think it's important to take that into consideration. But then there's the responsibility. So you want to put out a good product, because if you have any type of social platform on the web, then you want to make sure that the book is an integral part of it, and makes you look even better than you look right now. But it's definitely taking things in your own hands, which is what you're doing with self-publishing and with hybrid publishing, which is what we do, basically allowing the author to have control, but with a team of professionals, that you, Grace, mentioned is so important. That is being in the game. That is taking matters in your own hands and letting the world know the wisdom that you have to share without asking anybody for permission.
What Alinka said, all of that.
I love that. I suppose another important advantage is just less waiting time, which I guess speaks to that gap. The traditional route just takes forever. It'll probably take you 2-3 years just to get a deal if you do. Yeah. And that's before you actually start the process of kind of selling your book. So.
And if you're trying to write on a time-sensitive topic, I mean, by the time your book is published, it might not be a time-sensitive topic anymore. So, right. Especially if you're writing about recent events, or if you're trying to capitalize on a trend in fiction that seems to be selling really well at the moment, self-publishing or working with someone, with a team that can get you published outside of the traditional publishing route can be much more beneficial for getting your work out there and into the hands of readers.
There's one thing that we should mention for sure is what happens when a reader orders a book. Can you talk about that, Deborah?
Well, certainly if they're ordering an ebook, I mean, obviously the computer handles everything, and then the text is electronically delivered to their account / device of choice. But obviously when we're talking about print on demand, when we're doing a physical book, it's a little different. So for example, mostly the print on demand books are going to be paperbacks, although Amazon not too long ago introduced a beta program for doing hardcovers as well, which are not bad quality. We've tested it out just to see what they do, and their hardcovers are pretty good. But once you place an order, the book is printed at that time. And that can take a little time as well, just to be completely upfront for you guys. Right now, Amazon says, for example, that there's a 10-day production period, or they don't characterize it as a production period. They just say when you go to order a print on demand book that it usually ships in 10 days. And then of course you have the shipping time on top of that. So they're definitely allotting a not insignificant bit of time for doing the production of that book for you. That could be due to the current issues with the supply chain and shipping delays on account of both the pandemic and the holiday season. But just be aware that right now they are saying that it takes about 10 days to produce a book and ship it out.
Yeah, and this is as opposed to offset printing.
Right. When you go through a traditional printing press, quantity is a significant factor. So in print on demand, you can figure out what your printing cost is upfront per unit. And then you set your margin, whatever you'd like to charge on top of the cost of production. And then that's what your book sells for. You know exactly how much you're going to make in royalties. But when you're going through a traditional printing press, quantity is a big factor. So how much the per unit cost is going to depend on how many copies you order, which will ultimately affect your bottom line once you take into account all of the expenses in producing that book, storing that book, and shipping that book to your readers after you sell it. And it takes longer. Like right now in the printing industry, we're talking a month for paperbacks, a month's lead time. So that doesn't really take into account all the setup and then the shipping, especially if you're working with a publisher and have to go through a distribution center, which adds time because they have to receive the book, stock it, and then ship it out to retailers, which adds easily another 4 to 6 weeks to that process. So much more complicated and costly and higher time investment when you're going through those traditional
Right.
routes.
I think some of our listeners might be wondering, can the reader tell when they're ordering the book or when they're looking at the Amazon page, can they tell if this book has been traditionally published, self-published, or done through a hybrid traditional publisher?
I would say for the most part, no. It does depend on the choices that you make for the printing parameters. So for example, a lot of, so for traditional publishing, you can get glue bound spines so that the papers are just glued to the spine. And that's the same with print on demand. That's how the book is going to be produced. And you can't tell the difference between your small print on demand job and a book printed on by a traditional press, because a lot of the traditional printers are using digital production now as well. But once you can get to more expensive production choices with traditional printing that aren't available on a self-publishing level, like certain paper types, or when you're getting into hardcovers and you're dealing with like specialty boards and stitching and trying to get into embossing or doing fancy things with the cover, that's not something you can necessarily reproduce with your print on demand choices through a company like Amazon. That would require much more fancy setup with an actual printer to get those things done.
Yeah, and for sure there's a niche, there's
Yeah.
a market for that type of book, but not big enough for, Amazon
No.
print on demand to have that.
That's a much more specialty thing. Just if you're just trying to get your book in the hands of readers and as many readers as possible, you're going to stick with the most mainstream format of book production. And that's probably going to be just your run-of-the-mill paperback that has like a glued spine, standard paper, standard ink, probably not color for the most part, and it'll look great, whether it's produced by, for example, Amazon KDP, or if you go with a traditional printer.
Well, we've been talking a lot about Amazon.
Yeah.
Are there any other platforms that people might be interested in publishing their books at?
So for the most part, Amazon is the big one. I mean, they have such great coverage and they're global. And so you can get your books in other countries besides the United States. They're ubiquitous.
Number one market share.
Yeah. There are other choices, of course. There are smaller companies who do print on demand. You can do a paperback through Barnes & Noble is another choice. But most of the other platforms, I think you would really focus on the ebook more than the physical book.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah, for physical book production, Amazon still they've got the coverage.
So Amazon is a really interesting animal because even though there are other platforms like Barnes & Noble and there's Apple, there's just two, there's more, there's way more. But Amazon has this interesting program called KDP Select, where they want you to go with them only and not publish on the other platforms, and they incentivize you to do that by giving you some perks. Can you talk about that, Deborah?
So with KDP Select, you can actually get access to some higher royalty earnings thanks to that program. especially for readers outside of the United States. Like I think they'll bump up your royalty earning to about 70% for customers like in Japan and Mexico, Brazil, a couple of other countries. But most importantly, being in KDP Select gives you access to some really great promotional tools, specifically the Kindle countdown deals, and then also the free book promotion period. So that's really where the value comes in for that. And again, since we've talked about the great coverage that Amazon has, how it's like available globally and so many people use it, if you can really leverage a countdown deal or a free book promotion, it can really raise the profile of your book, get more people reading it, help it trend on Amazon. So it's like discoverable to a lot more readers than you might reach otherwise, and just give you maybe some more organic reach by doing that. And then of course, your book's available pretty much worldwide. I mean, pretty much any country that has an Amazon site and ebooks in that country, they can get your book. So it can be a really helpful thing.
And a lot of authors ask, so should I do it? Should I go with KDP Select or should I go wide and, be on all those platforms? And my recommendation is test it, because marketing is testing. And the best way to do it is to start with going into KDP Select for 90 days, but then you can uncheck that box on your dashboard. So it's not going to automatically subscribe you for the following 90 days. And then you're free to have your book elsewhere. For example, if you want a permanently free book, there's such a concept that your book is free. Why would your book be free? Because you're using it as a lead generator to bring business, to bring clients to your business. So it makes sense to do that. Like we do that with Outsource Your Book, and that has driven a lot of business to us. It's essentially a permanently free book, meaning that it's free on all the platforms. And you can also have it on your website, because when you go with KDP Select, you cannot have the book on your website, whether it's paid or free. So there's, there are pros and cons. It depends what your book is supposed to do for you. It depends on your goals. So that's one of the first things we ask people that we work with, our authors, before we even invite them to discovery call to see if we're a good fit. Like we want to know why. Why are you doing this book, and what is this book, what is it going to do for you? Many authors at the beginning are not so clear, but it's super important to know that, because that defines the whole strategy. Right? So if you're saying, I'm going to write a book and give it away for free, why? Well, for the same reason that when you go to the supermarket, there are all those cheese samples that they give away for free. You take it, right? Then you go buy the whole cheese. So same here. The book is free. Okay, I'll take it. I'll read it. Ooh, this author is really smart. Ooh, they really know what they're doing. Ooh, I actually need to get that done in my business. Ooh, I'm going to hire them or their team to do that for me. So that's sort of the idea of a perma-free book. It's an online lead generator, or also offline, because it can be used offline as a paperback, as a lead generator too. Right. So I think we've covered an important chunk of pros and cons of self-publishing. Grace, would you like to wrap this conversation up by letting our listeners know, what the third opportunity is that we didn't mention? We didn't talk about so much, the hybrid publisher.
Yeah, so hybrid publishing is a really nice sweet spot between traditional and self-publishing, because you get that speed and that agility and that control. And if you're with a good hybrid publishers, you get that high rate of royalties. So it's a really good, as the name kind of gives away, in between of the two, of the advantages of both. You have a lot more control, creative control. Yeah, in my totally unbiased opinion, hybrid is wonderful.
Right. Yeah. In our totally unbiased opinion, check out Leaders Press to see what we can do for you. All right. Well, wonderful. Thank you so much. And see you guys at our next episode.
Thank you for listening. This has been the Leaders Get Published podcast, brought to you by Leaders Press. Don't miss another episode, and subscribe today at leaderspress.com/subscribe. And if you'd like to discover which type of book you should write, go to leaderspress.com/reveal.